let's get to the big three.
Number 3.
Because we see far too many parallels between Donald Trump and Andrew Cuomo. Both administrations have been characterized by corruption, by a sense of impunity.
That is Zoran Mondani, the commie. He had another socialist making major gains over on the West Coast, over in Seattle, while he spends a day going after not Cuomo, not Adams, not Sliwa, but Trump.
Number 2.
Even the Europeans, even that have been fighting alongside the Ukrainians just as we have been, they can see too this needs to come to an end, and President Trump is the perfect person at the perfect time to bring this war to resolution.
Mr. Secretary of State, he was there the first time. Mike Pompeo weighs in this time. 3 days and counting until Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin meet in Alaska. 2 days until Donald Trump joins our show on Thursday at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. We preview the stakes, likely outcomes, and Europe's desperate plea to play a role.
Number 1.
I want to read you a text from, we'll just say, they're very liberal. He says, this may sound controversial, but I'm not totally opposed to Trump's National Guard move in D.C. I know he's doing it for politics, but crime remains rampant. I've had too many friends carjacked, shot at. None of us will walk more than 3 blocks after 8 p.m. 13-year-olds are committing many of these crimes.
And that is Joe Scarborough's liberal friend. Crackdown. Keep your stats. We live in a reality with the Trump administration smackdown on crime, and fifth in major cities began his quest in the nation's capital. Already there is pushback, and why no one is taking the backlash seriously, because people who live in D.C. know the danger. You just heard it. Jamie Metzl joins us now. Jamie, have you lived in D.C.?
I have.
And your thoughts about the state of crime and your worry, if just Jamie Metzl, your well-built guy, prime of your life, walking down the street a few blocks from the White House, are you worried?
Crime in D.C. is a problem. I live in New York City now. Crime in New York is a problem.
They tell us it's down in both places.
Well, you live in the outer boroughs. I live in New York City. So ride the 456 train anytime at night. Literally in every car, there's some kind of scary person, and the scary person's on one side of the car, and everybody else is on the other side. And at the stop, everybody gets out, and they go to the next car. And it turns out it's the same situation in the next car. We in the United States, we have a problem with crime, and we have a problem with homelessness. They have to be addressed. As I was talking to you in the break, I don't think this is the optimal way of addressing it. I think we have a systemic problem, and we need a systemic response. But there's no doubt about it. We heard it today that President Trump is raising the profile of this issue and raising the pressure on solving it.
So what do you think it is, Jamie, when he's dressing the press corps? Do you see the size of that crowd yesterday?
Yeah.
Right. I mean, and I think all of them live in the area. You have to. You can't do that.
Yeah. Yep.
So if you tell them crime's down, there's no worry. I didn't get that from any of those questions. I was doing the show at the same time.
Right.
Now, one of those questions was like, Mr. President, there's really no crime problem in D.C., even though the stats say it's at it's going down.
Well, if you don't arrest anybody for crimes, the stats will go down. In New York, we have this issue where there are all kinds of petty crimes that are happening. And if you don't arrest anybody, or if the police are feeling, well, I'm going to arrest somebody for some relatively minor theft, and then they're just going to be let go.
They don't bother.
Then people don't bother. So definitely people living in New York, people in Washington recognize there's a problem. That problem needs to be addressed. But I just think we need to address this problem as optimally as possible.
But do you think, and I think what Trump is saying is, my analogy would be an EMT. So the guy's bleeding, there's being shot at. I got to stop the bleeding. And then you go, well, where's the gunshots come from? We'll get to the gunshots. First, I got to stop the bleeding. So what he's saying is, let's stop the crime the best we can, whether it's men and women in camouflage, working in coordination with cops who are depleted, the numbers are down.
Right.
And then we could say, hey, we got a problem with the homeless. Most of these people have psychological problems, not financial problems. And then we start.
Yeah, so as I was mentioning to you in the break, I don't think putting a few hundred uniformed military officers on the street is going to make much of a dent in this problem, unless we have a China-style approach of just going around in trucks and rounding everybody up and putting them in camps. What we need is a systematic response. So another way that Trump could have done this is to say, we have a problem, starting in D.C., where the president has unique authority, and to say that if we don't have a plan led by local authorities that can make a major dent in the problems of homelessness and lawlessness within 3 months, I'm going to move in with the National Guard. And I think that would have been more empowering because, as you say, exactly right. There are all kinds of issues. There are economic issues, mental health issues. Yes, people need to be protected, and we need to make sure that we're fully supporting and funding our police. And yes, there's a problem with recruitment. But again, the question is, how can we best address this problem?
Right. I think that he said, I was here 4 years ago. We had the same problem with crime. It's a little worse with George Floyd stuff. Got it. I went to put national troops in. He said, oh, you're making everything worse. But then it got worse once we left. And he had people in his own administration pushing back. Now he goes, no, I gave you 4.5 years. I gave you 4 years off. And now I'm coming back and the problem's still here. Here's what he said. And by the way, are you for eliminating no cash bail?
Well, I just think we have a problem with bail. I mean, I was telling you in the break that I live in the Upper East Side of New York. I mean, my now closed local drugstore, I asked them, how often are you robbed? And they said about every 30 minutes, every single day, they're being robbed. It's just crazy that we have these people who are repeat offenders who are putting back out onto the streets. It's a mental health issue. It's an economic issue. It's a crime issue. And these issues must be solved. It's great that President Trump is trying to catalyze things, but we need a whole of society response.
But don't you agree that the problem is you can't prosecute people? So you prosecute people and they're out because it's not they so-called a serious crime. That's why the Rite Aid by me just closed. The CVS is closing. They go for stores. Here's what Janine Pirro says as the U.S. Attorney, cut 11.
We need to go after the D.C. Council and their absurd laws. We need to get rid of this concept of, no cash bail. We need to recognize that the people who matter are the law-abiding citizens. And it starts today. But it's not going to end today, because the president is going to do everything we need to do to make sure that these emboldened criminals understand we see you, we're watching you, and we're going to change the law to catch you.
And that's what's got to happen, but not just in D.C. It's got to happen in Chicago. It's got to happen in New York. It's got to happen in Boston. It's got to happen in Philadelphia, Los Angeles, and San Francisco.
I agree. I think everybody matters in our democracy. A lot of the people who are committing these crimes are repeat offenders with mental health issues, with homelessness issues, or they're teens.
14-year-olds.
Exactly. And so what we need to do is, again, have a systemic response to this problem that is much bigger and broader than putting military forces on our streets. I just don't think that is going to solve the fundamental underlying problem. Is this a catalyst? Yes, we're having this conversation right now. But if President Trump wants to take the lead on a national systemic effort to address these critical problems that are really undermining our society, I think that's great.
So you have something you're going to be taking part of, and we're talking about designer babies.
Yep.
Is China ahead of us here, designing the perfect
Well, I don't know
human?
about perfect, but certainly China has fewer ethical constraints than we do in just messing with biology.
And fewer women.
Well, China, not now, actually. That was in the past. They were doing this selective abortion, essentially. But right now, we are on the verge. I write about this in my last two books, Superconvergence and Hacking Darwin. We're in the verge of a new phase of human habitation on Earth. And in this new phase, humans uniquely will be able to engineer novel intelligence and re-engineer all of life, including our own. And it's this massive godlike power. And the question is, how can we apply that most responsibly? And there's a debate on human genome editing, what I wrote about in Hacking Darwin. And we're having this debate with Barry Weiss as the moderator in Pittsburgh on September 10th. And I will be arguing that we need to be open-minded about the possibility in the future of making relatively small edits to the genomes of future children, not to create super soldiers, but to change lives of young children who might be born with deadly genetic diseases that would cause them to die in just a few years and allow them to live long and healthy lives. And so this is a very serious capability, and it needs to be dealt with responsibly and ethically.
Aren't we doing something already with that? Or being able to spot problems in utero?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So there's a whole transformation in how we're thinking about the application of advanced technologies to reproduction. And whether it's the tools of assisted reproduction like IVF and embryo screening, whether it's fetal surgeries, which are now relatively commonplace. And then we have a whole new era of gene therapies, both for children and for adults, which aren't heritable, but are a whole new way of treating and ultimately preventing diseases.
Right. I guess we're heading there. People, people are worried about this. I remember when the stem cell research debate popped up. Wow, you can't do that. People are going to have abortions just to get the stem cells. But we ameliorated that, didn't we? Because now we realize that stem cells can be effective. You could use the umbilical cord,
right? And
then you could have humans store your own stem cells, right?
Yeah, and so that was a big debate. And if you'll remember, it was actually just before.
It was an interesting debate, wasn't it?
Just before 9/11,
Yeah.
there were some people who were saying that we shouldn't have any stem cell technology, any stem cell research. That's still the position of the Catholic
Church. Guess who pushed back on it?
Who?
Nancy Reagan.
Yeah, no, but all kinds of people. And again, this is why I'm always so happy to come on with you, Brian. You're a Republican. I'm a Democrat. But what we're trying to do is find just common sense answers to common problems. So stem cells represent a tremendous opportunity for humans to treat and prevent terrible, deadly diseases. That doesn't mean that we should go crazy and think about every imaginary application of this technology, but it means that we can come together and find sensible, smart, thoughtful ways of deploying these technologies in ways that both respect the individual and allow for the kinds of breakthroughs that can save people's lives.
I want to save some time on the second segment, but real quick, are you optimistic something will emerge positive from Alaska?
I'm not optimistic for a number of reasons. One, I don't like what Trump said about doing land swaps, especially if the Ukrainians aren't on board. That has echoes of Yalta, and I just don't think that will prove feasible.
When we gave up the Eastern Europe.
On behalf of the Eastern Europeans without consulting them. Second thing is President Trump hasn't mentioned anything about security guarantees for Ukraine. And for Ukraine to remain viable, they're going to need those kinds of security guarantees. You've been a tremendous advocate for the Ukrainian people, and the heroics of the Ukrainians standing up against impossible odds in defending their families and their countries is really incredible. So I certainly have a fear that they may be undermined by what happens in Alaska, but I will be the first person nominating President Trump for a Nobel Prize if he can negotiate a Russian withdrawal from Ukrainian territory and Ukraine joining NATO.
Yeah, if it was George Bush or Bill Clinton, I would have said what you said. I worry about it. But it's the unorthodox presidency of Donald Trump.
Well, we'll find out.
I
hope so.
Yeah. I would say, okay, this, Kissinger's your Secretary of State, and this is what has to be done. By the time the leaders show up, it's just signing paperwork. It's much different now.
Right.
You lead with your chief executive.
Well, the proof will be in the pudding. I mean, let's see what happens. But I'm cautious.
I'm not guaranteeing anything.
Yeah.
Because remember, he walked away from North Korea. And we thought that was on the cusp.
But he walked away from North Korea after giving a huge gift to the North Koreans and
Of what? Of meeting?
Of legitimacy.
Oh.
I mean, and so our policy since the beginning has been trying to isolate President Putin. Not only is he meeting with President Putin, but he is inviting him to U.S. territory, which he is calling Russian territory. I'm sure that was just a slip of tongue yesterday. So I have cautions. If you are right, nobody will be happier than me.
How did things go so wrong?
Democrats got sidetracked off the main road, which is what people vote for us, which is to help them in their lives, save money so they can buy a home, save money so they can educate their kids, take a holiday, healthcare, save for retirement. I've made a central point. The American dream is unaffordable. It's inaccessible to the American people, and that is just totally unacceptable to us. I think the reason Democrats are where they are is we started talking about basically transgender issue, Latinx, defunding the police, a whole host of cultural topics and others, climate change, which is existential and important. But the public was telling you one thing, and we were talking another thing.
So that is Rahm Emanuel is clearly running for president. You probably know him.
Yep.
Do you know him?
I've met him before.
So is that the attitude, the approach? Because Mark Pence said last week, I don't think that Bill Clinton could get the nomination in the Democratic Party right now. Rahm Emanuel's trying to.
Yeah. Well, I love Rahm Emanuel. I'm a liberal centrist Democrat, so I'm fully aligned with most of what Rahm Emanuel says. And unfortunately, We have this crazy far left wing of the Democratic Party, exemplified here in New York by Zoran Mamdani, who wants to globalize the Intifada and control the means of production and do all of these things that speak to a small sliver of the American electorate. And so if the Democratic Party want to be a perpetual minority party rejected by most Americans, they should go to the left. But if we want to return to a space of supporting the aspirations of most Americans, we need to go where most Americans are, not where a small slate of primary voters are. And that means we need to embrace these ideals of the common good that are part of the history of the Democratic Party. We are the party of FDR. We are the party of Bill Clinton, people who found ways of bringing people together. We need to be that again.
All right. You also were upset about the dismissal of a friend of yours from West Point. Tell me about it.
Jen Easterly, who I've been friends with her for over 20 years. Her name used to be Jenny Cook. Is one of the smartest, most patriotic Americans I've ever met in my life. She is a brilliant Rhodes Scholar, graduate of West Point. She served honorably in the United States military. She was the head of cybersecurity. She is the absolute most incredible person in the world. She was appointed to a professorship at West Point, and nobody embodies the best of American values more than Jen Easterly. And she was on her way to assume that role when Laura Loomer attacked her for not being sufficiently loyal to Donald Trump. And there's no record of that being the case. Jen is so careful and so thoughtful. And her appointment, she was dismissed by the Secretary of the Army. This is an absolute travesty. We've seen an official attacked by Laura Loomer, who lost their jobs, recently being reinstated. That is Vinay Prasad, who is the FDA vaccine person. Now Vinay Prasad is back. I certainly hope that the administration will take a close look at the Jen Easterly case, because if people like Laura Loomer are determining our future, we're really in trouble.
Let's say there's a great person.
Yes.
She is a great person.
Yeah.
Does she against Trump? Like Mattis is another great general, not for Trump.
Yeah.
So is that a
There's
problem?
no record. No, she hasn't spoken up. She hasn't done the kind of things like many people have, speaking up against Trump.
Hopefully, because I am not a Laura Loomer fan. She's blowing up way too many people.
Yeah.
I think she's a hindrance, and I do not know the allure there. I hope if she's the person you are, I hope she gets back.
You are awesome, Brian. Thank you.
No, the president's got a lot to focus on leading up till Friday. European Union wants to play a role and give the president a protocol to ask for a ceasefire, then ask for security guarantees. Before you talk about any land swaps, you got to get the buy-in from the Ukrainians, and that needs parliament. So Andrew Weiss joins us now. Andrew, what are your thoughts, and what do you think the stakes are on Friday?
Well, the president has, once again done something that surprised everybody, right? He announced this meeting just last Friday, leaves himself very little time to prepare. He's created big waves, a lot of attention, media attention and political attention. But these are not, necessarily the right ways to prepare for a meeting with someone like Vladimir Putin, right? Who's been in his job for a quarter century. He knows these issues backwards and forwards. And what we've seen is much more on the U.S. side, kind of doing stuff on the fly. And I think that is the problem for Friday, is Vladimir Putin knows what he's doing. He's got a very methodical approach to things, which is to grind down the Ukrainians on the battlefield and then to try to create division between the United States and Ukraine and Europe on the other hand. And so far, he's being rather successful on both of those strategies. The U.S. approach, I'd say, is still a work in progress.
Well, a couple of things. He could, if they're going to meet face to face, I would love for Trump to say, if you're not sincere about doing something that's a substantial piece, the Senate sanctions are coming right down the pike, and in come more arms immediately. And Europe's already committed more. I've never seen Europe more committed. He could honestly say that. Europe is more in today than I think they were 2 years ago. So how important would it be for him to say the sanctions are coming if you're not sincere?
No, I think you've got the elements there of a broad plan, Brian. I think those are the elements. The one that I would say is also there's about $300 billion in frozen Russian money sitting in bank accounts in Europe. It would be a good move for the United States and Europe to say, we're going to seize those funds and we're going to use that to bankroll these purchases of U.S. weapons going forward to keep Ukraine in the fight. The problem for the strategy you're outlining just now is that economic sanctions don't scare Vladimir Putin, right? He's seen the biggest economic sanctions over the last nearly 4 years, and they have not slowed down Russia's war. So just saying we're going to do more of that doesn't change his calculus.
Well,
it's really got to be about a longer term commitment to Ukraine and to showing that the United States and Europe are not going to walk away. That's what will change him to think maybe he's not going to get what he wants.
The other thing I would say is different about these sanctions are the secondary sanctions. And there is some reports that India picked up the phone and said, hey, they're going to tariff me 100%. So I don't even know I'm buying your oil. So they're going to have a sustained relationship and they'll probably make the purchases. But that really would affect them. The next would be Turkey and Brazil. And the last one would probably be China. So that would be a little bit of start hurting your friends.
Yeah, no, you're right. But the question is, can we do things that hurt Russia without hurting ourselves and hurting our economic well-being? And because Russia is such a big crude oil producer, it's either the second or the third largest crude oil producer in the world. If you do something that makes it really costly for people, including China and India, who are the two biggest purchasers of Russian oil, if you make it really, really expensive for them, ultimately that price is going to get passed on to American and European consumers, and that's going to hurt our economic vitality. And so far, I don't think President Trump's been willing to go there.
So right now, it looks like despite 2 years of an offensive from Moscow, they've only taken 1% of the land. So, and they've lost, over 1 million casualties by all accounts. They're using prisoners, North Korean soldiers, and they're still not punching through. But there are reports, Andrew, I don't know if you've seen them, that there's a major Russian offensive right now on the eve of this meeting. Have you heard that?
Yeah, so there's some gains. Russia is pushing across, a pretty long front, but there's only a handful of areas where there's really heavy fighting going on. And now Russia is punching through in one of those pockets. It's not good. It's not a breakthrough in the sense that Ukraine is a house of cards that's going to, come apart, but it definitely puts pressure on Ukraine ahead of Friday's meeting. And it gives Putin a stronger hand to say to the president, look, Ukraine's, on the back foot here. I'm going to get what I want eventually, so why not give it to me? And that's where I think the real danger is for Friday with President Trump and his strategy. This is not a war about territory. And if the president approaches it simply as a question of, here, let's, chop off pieces of Ukraine and hand them to Russia, thinking that that might cause Vladimir Putin to stop. That's not what's going to make Putin stop, unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, do you think from your reports, Andrew, that Steve Witkoff got something different last week from Vladimir Putin that had him contact the president and say, there's some movement here? Because we did hear about some discrepancy between some type of land swaps.
Yeah, so the details are fuzzy, but there have been some reports in the Wall Street Journal and other places describing what the president's envoy and Vladimir Putin talked about last week. It seems like what Putin put on the table was, hey, if Ukraine withdraws from the entire region, which is called the Donbass, plus the other areas of Ukraine that Russia has laid claim to, then Putin would agree to a ceasefire. So he's flipping the sequencing. The original plan that Trump and Witkoff had put on the table with the Russians was, let's get the ceasefire in place now, and then let's talk about a peace settlement. So what Putin has sort of put on the table here is a reverse sequence, and that has caused a lot of panic in Ukraine. It's caused a lot of panic in Europe because they're worried that we're going to be giving away stuff to the Russians and in exchange for a pretty flimsy offer for a possible ceasefire.
So
it's not enough.
Yeah, it said Russia would be ready to withdraw from the southern region of Zaporizhia and Kherson in exchange for a full control of Donetsk, that according to the Europeans. And then Witkoff walked it back. He claimed the next day in a call with his chief aides and European leaders, suggesting Russia would both withdraw and freeze the front line. So it's important to get some clarification on something like that. But that would be something new. So if I'm Witkoff walking into the same meeting, I'd say, okay, there is something going on here.
Yeah, it's just the question is there an actual Russian concession. So far, there's no indication there's a concession. And the Russians have this very funny expression, which is the only free cheese is in a mousetrap. And so I think that is a bit of what's going on here. And then the part which I think Secretary Rubio has put his finger on is that you want to bring in the president as a closer. You don't want to bring the president in as the person who just kind of tests the waters, takes Putin's temperature. And unfortunately, that's kind of where we're going on Friday. And the president himself said this in his press conference yesterday. He wants to feel Putin out, I think was the phrase he used, and then make a judgment on whether the Russians are serious. I think the record over the past 6 months is that Putin is not serious and that he's been diddling the president. And the president has complained about this on multiple occasions, but now he seems eager to kind of, do something that's dramatic. It's similar, if you remember, Brian, to the meetings he had with the North Korean leader during his first term in office, where there were two sort of high-level meetings and not a ton of sort of ground was laid in advance. And ultimately, those two meetings with Kim Jong-un did not lead to a breakthrough in U.S.-North Korean relations. I suspect we're going to follow that script on Friday.
Here's what Jack Keane said, cut 26.
The part that Putin wants is the so-called fortified belt. 5 Ukrainian cities, all fortified along a 50-mile route. If Putin could get this conciliatory, not having to fight for it, go to a ceasefire, you know he's going to violate a ceasefire. He has always violated them in the past, and he would be in a much better position to really grab off some territory inside of Ukraine.
So if you have a ceasefire without security guarantees, they could keep moving, right?
Yes and no. I think, there's another good possibility for Friday, which would be a partial ceasefire. What President Trump had demanded up to this point was comprehensive. But let's imagine that Putin and Trump agree that there should be a break, a moratorium on Russian and Ukrainian attacks from the air. And that, that would lead to a break in attacks on Ukrainian cities, which have been rather devastating throughout Trump's time in office since January. Something like that would not be all bad. The question is, how long would it persist? Would it go past, say, 30 days? And at that point, would it break down? And who would be blamed for any breakdown? I think something like that would give, the Ukrainians a sort of a breather, which they seriously need. It would allow Putin to look like a reasonable guy who's willing to wheel and deal. And it would give the president a big, accomplishment. That would not be the worst of all worlds by any stretch if that's what comes out of Friday.
So do you think a no-fly zone, if they just said no, nothing flying, no drones, no jets, does that hurt Ukraine more than Russia?
A no-fly zone is different than what I'm talking about. I think, jets and drones are going to continue to be flying around. They're, particularly drones are absolutely central to how this war is being fought. I think it's a question of whether they're used to launch attacks or not. And so a no-fly zone would suggest, everything is grounded, nothing's flying around, which I think would be bad for Ukraine because they rely on these systems to monitor what Russia's up to and have also mastered the ability to hit Russian forces using these kinds of systems. The problem for the Ukrainians is they are a very big country, and defending it against Russian missile attacks and drone attacks relies on a lot of advanced technology that the United States, for example, the Patriot missiles that President Trump has offered Ukraine in recent weeks, there's a finite number of those systems in U.S. and Western inventories. And so there just isn't a lot of that stuff to give away, whereas Russia is ramping up its production of missiles. So over time, there's a gap that's inevitably opening up where Russia's able to get more stuff in and hit Ukraine harder, and Ukraine is less capable of defending itself.
Two last points. Number one, I worry about 45%, they say, of the Russian economy is military. And if they stop fighting, what do they do with all those people? That's their job. They could start stockpiling, which does not good for the world. But what do? Right now they're in a war footing, and that's how they're employing people. Number two is, do you think Vladimir Putin cares about embarrassing Trump, knowing that 3.5 years he's got to deal with this guy? And if they go to Alaska and Trump walks out with nothing, he's poisoned that relationship.
I think you're right, Brian. I think the Russians here don't have a totally free hand, and we shouldn't pretend that they're 10 feet tall and that they're going to march all the way to Kyiv. Those kinds of perceptions are not accurate. And I think you're right that Trump is unpredictable and the Russians don't want to get on his bad side. The problem is that Vladimir Putin has some very broad goals and he cares about them, I think, more than he cares about his relationship with Donald Trump. And those goals essentially mean subjugating Ukraine. And if that's what he's at, the other second set of goals is put a wedge between the United States and Ukraine and Europe and kind of create enough ill will and mistrust that the relationship starts to fall apart. We saw some of that, a preview of that after the disastrous Zelensky meeting in the Oval Office back in February. So those are the kinds of sort of tricks that Putin has up his sleeve. And the challenge for the president is like making sure you don't get pulled into any of those Russian machinations, and to really just make clear to Putin that A, you can't wait us out. B, we're going to keep allowing Ukraine and the Europeans to buy our weapons. And C, you need to stop this. And we're not going to sort of, fold our tent and, stop supporting the Ukrainians. Like they're the victims here. They're defending themselves against a Russian invasion.
Yeah, Andrew, one thing is NATO's never been stronger. I think they're over the fact that they understand Trump much better this time. And I think they're more united. Even the Germans are going to start putting money into their military. Two more countries are now involved in NATO. They're formidable, big assets. So a lot of the Russian strategy is already blown up in their face. Andrew,
absolutely.
Andrew, thanks so much. Dynamic times. I look forward to talking to you again.
Hey, thanks, Brian. Really great to be with you.
Because we see far too many parallels between Donald Trump and Andrew Cuomo. Far too many stories that make clear that both administrations have been characterized by corruption, by a sense of impunity, by an inability of an executive to understand that no means no, a prioritization of the interests of billionaires over working people, and an agenda that is driven by little else beyond the retention and accumulation of power.
Yeah, I mean, when you talk about Cuomo, that's why he left as governor. No means no. Also, he is an authoritarian. You know how he handled the pandemic, the ego that roared, the huge $5 million advance I think he got in order to write a book about the pandemic while New Yorkers were dying. He actually declared, I guess, the pandemic over. Seth Barron lived it. He's been all over the New York scene forever, and now he's joined the New York Post editorial board. Very successful author. Seth, first off, Mendami decided to spend yesterday going to all the boroughs, telling everybody, Trump is my enemy.
Yes.
How'd that go? Why is he doing that?
Well, I mean, it's obvious why he's doing it. He's doing it because he wants to distract from all of the other issues that he's got. He's resolutely against the police. He has this long, anti-cop record.
It's a big list you're going to go through, but
he's got a terrible record on Israel-Palestine. I mean, he has one of his big bills is to fine synagogues in being involved in support for Israel. He's really
cracked down on that.
Cracked down. He's hardcore on this. He took off for his third wedding celebration on a third continent in Uganda on a private compound with armed guards. Which looks kind of weird. He's got this rent stabilized apartment that he brags about. And
well, what is rate stabilization? You guys got it wrong. Rate stabilization
it's rent stabilized,
which means.
Well, it means that they can't raise the rent, or they can only raise it a tiny bit.
Why can you and I get that?
Sure. I mean, anyone can get it.
Doesn't matter how much you make?
No, not at all.
Well, what's it intended for?
Rent stabilization, rent control, rent regulation was put in after World War II when it seemed like there was an emergency because housing was so tight. And it's never gone away. The problem with what you get is you have people staying, they don't leave their apartments because they get a good deal. So you wind up with older people who are living in an apartment that's maybe more room than they need, but they don't leave because why should they? It just kind of, look, all economists, left and right, agree that rent control is not a good thing for the rental market.
Except for Mendami, who's not an economist.
That's right.
But here he was asked about it. Cut 32.
Former Governor Cuomo's proposal for what he's calling the Zoran's Law more specifically, he's talking about whether someone with your income level should be allowed to stay in a rent-stabilized apartment. As a policy proposal, what do you think of that stance?
What do we know about this policy proposal beyond the fact that it seeks to evict me from my apartment? Like so much of Andrew Cuomo's politics, it is characterized by a petty vindictiveness. It leaves far more questions than it has answers. How many New Yorkers would this apply to? How many New Yorkers would be evicted from their apartments?
So is that a good answer?
Not really. I mean, if you were to apply it, a lot of them would be evicted because a lot of people, make enough money that it's not clear, that make above what Cuomo says should be the limit. Now, on the other hand, we have to remember Cuomo's the one who signed into law the new restrictions on rent regulation, which basically make it there used to be an income cutoff where once you made a certain amount of money for a certain amount of years, like your apartment was taken out of rent regulation and you had to pay the market price. Cuomo got rid of that. So, I don't really know where Cuomo comes off like talking like this.
But he doesn't know if he can go back at Cuomo that way because the thing is, this guy is the one who doesn't like billionaires, doesn't like capitalism, and says everything's unaffordable. Well, one of the reasons is you make $150,000, your wife's rich, and you're holding on to a rent-stabilized apartment.
Sure. No, I mean, he's a hypocrite. There's no question. He's a rich kid. He's a hypocrite. He wants to, he has this idea that they're going to freeze the rent. But all that's going to do is make the housing stock less appealing because it's going to fall apart. They're making it impossible for people who own these buildings to repair them, rehabilitate them.
So we had John Catsimatidis raise money for Curtis Sliwa. He seems to be endorsing Eric Adams, but he's friendly with Cuomo too. So we have this race now. And after Labor Day, it's really going to heat up.
Sure.
So he's got about a 20-point lead right now.
Right.
What changes in the fall? Being that he's so vulnerable, it seems to clear-thinking Democrats, let alone Republicans.
Listen, right now he seems like he's got it lined up. I mean, here's the problem in politics. You can't beat somebody with nobody. And Cuomo and Adams, I'm not going to say they're nobody, but they're not very popular right now. Curtis is great, but Curtis has his own baggage and, he's a Republican, so people aren't necessarily going to cross over to vote for him. Right now, Mamdani has all the momentum. I don't know what could, look, things can come out. He's not an experienced politician. He could say something really dumb.
Dumber than he's already said? It's
look,
crazy.
He has a cult following, and they will not listen to anything against him. And this goes for virtually the entire New York City political media.
Does this surprise you? The rank and file and Google employees donated nearly $40,000 to Mamdani's campaign. Meta chipped in $10,500. Bloomberg, about $10,000. Spotify, Block, Squarespace. They all gave money to the socialists. Columbia University system ranked second overall with nearly $33,000 in donations. The Cooney system donated to NYU. So it seems a lot of these, the tech workers who should be probably working, if the stereotype is correct, 60 hours a week, when you break it in that business, they prefer to give most of their money away?
Listen, this is a reality about socialist movements, is they're no longer based around working class concerns. They appeal to mid or higher level the professional class, like people who, they're not quite like billionaires or millionaires even, but they do very well. And this is kind of a contradiction, but it's kind of like it's not really the haves versus the have-nots. It's like the have some versus the have a lot.
So what's the big deal with Hakeem Jeffries and Senator Schumer and Dan Goldman and Governor Hochul just endorsing him? Hey, we're a big tent. Yeah, I don't agree with him. Why haven't they endorsed him yet? Seth, Barron, what's the risk?
Because, here's the thing, is the Democrat Party has a lot of donors who are pro-Israel and are not keen to just turn everything over to, pro-Israel and also pro-business. Look, the Democrat Party is $1 trillion institution. They're not just going to turn it over to the Democratic Socialists of America and say, okay, you won a primary it's all yours. You're the leaders. You take the party. I mean, that would be crazy. So, they're going to fight back.
But how are they? They're not fighting. They're just sitting. They're not saying anything. Schumer, the most gutless Democrat ever, doesn't stand up for Israel,
Nope.
but writes a book about anti-Semitism, doesn't stand up at Columbia, doesn't stand up against NYU, about City College.
Look, they don't stand for anything. They're for 10 years, all they've done is oppose Trump. They have no program.
So people listening around the country, more than, in New York, we have people listening around the country. And this is why it's a national story. Because you got this Somali who won the Democratic primary or about to in Minneapolis. This Katie Wilson is a far-left progressive over in Seattle. She has got 50% of the vote, so she won and beat the incumbent in a primary, but they're both going to compete in November. The sitting mayor is Democratic Mayor Bruce Harrell, but she ran on, tell me if this sounds familiar, combating federal policies targeting immigrants and refugees. In other words, she's pro-sanctuary city. Use progressive revenue funds to serve as to cut by the federal government. So she's pro all those social programs. Expansion of the non-police alternative response to crises. Cue the social worker.
Yeah.
Create green union jobs. Installing city-owned solar panels. $1 billion for affordable housing. She's a socialist.
Yes, absolutely. This is where
Spreading.
Well, look, what happened over the last 5-10 years? A lot of conservatives left the cities. Or people who are not even conservatives, but maybe they're family-oriented. They want the better things for their children. They want more space. So who does that leave? It leaves the people who like the dysfunction of the cities. And naturally, that's what they're going to vote for. This kind of...
So more than 20 years ago when Giuliani was running, you're saying there are less Republicans in these cities?
Absolutely. Absolutely. There's been a huge change. I mean, just look at the demographics.
Even though there's more Republicans in America.
Yes, but look at the demographics of New York City in the last 25 years. They've completely shifted. You don't have the Giuliani base anymore. It would be impossible for someone like him to be elected. Look at Brooklyn and Queens. You don't have the same kind of like white ethnic. But the only place left is Staten Island. That still maintains that kind of, really conservative point of view. The rest of the city is completely flipped.
So AOC, who's really not servicing her community at all, and she famously made sure Amazon didn't flourish here and people didn't have jobs, so somehow she thinks that's a good move. But she's kind of distancing herself from the squad while being the key endorser of Mondami. Is there a plan here to make her a national figure?
I mean, I imagine she'll run for president, and I don't know who plausibly could stop her or is a better candidate. She has, charisma of a sort. She can talk a good game, and she seems fairly popular. I don't think she could necessarily win a national election, but I don't see why she couldn't become the nominee. The Democrat Party is kind of, look, they lost with Hillary. Biden was a disaster. Harris was a disaster. The center of the party is gone. Like, they don't have any leaders.
Well, I'll give you an example. Governor Shapiro is going to couch himself that way. I know that Rahm Emanuel was on with Megyn Kelly. He says, look, I'm against men playing in women's sports. I'm against locker rooms. I want locker rooms for men and women. So he's saying things. I'm going to be excommunicated tongue-in-cheek, but he's saying I'm running in the middle. And I'm wondering, Seth, does that have resonance in the Democratic Party?
I don't think so. Not now. I think that, and for one thing, both Shapiro and Emanuel, they're
Bashir.
Bashir, being like from Kentucky, a red state, they're gonna push that. But Shapiro and Emanuel are too untrustworthy on Israel and on the teachers' unions.
For you.
No, well, yeah, for me, but no, not for me.
What do you mean? What do you mean untrustworthy?
Well, for the Democrats, for the left, for the hard left, they're going to look at Shapiro and Emanuel and be like, these guys aren't going to stand with Hamas. These guys are too pro-Israel. These guys also don't have the trust of the teachers' union.
See, I'm still idealistic. I think the most Democrats are not pro-Hamas, not pro-Al-Qaeda. Not anti-American, and I just don't think they say anything.
Look, that may be, but But right now, the momentum in the party, the momentum among the Democratic base is hard left.
Yeah, it's hard to argue except for to say this. If the momentum was there and these spineless Democrats like Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries and Kathy Hochul and Nancy Pelosi, if they were that sure of it, they would jump on. But there's some hesitancy there. Outside Elizabeth Warren, they know there's no future in Mamdani in America.
Yes.
Don't you think that?
I do think that, but the way the party system works is they will get savaged if they come out hard against these insurgents. Like, they have to play this game very carefully. Schumer, I don't know why he's sticking around, but, somebody's going to primary him eventually. Hochul could face a primary challenge from the left.
Do you give Elise Stefanik a chance in the general?
Oh, absolutely, I do. I think she's got a very good chance. I mean, right now, I think the latest polls show her, down 12 or 14, but, she doesn't have...
hasn't started yet.
Yeah, I mean, there's name recognition issues. I mean, Zeldin came very close to beating Hochul, and I think Elise is a stronger candidate. I think she's a better, speaker. I mean, I think Zeldin was great, but just in terms of...
I agree with you. I think she's a lethal weapon to debate. This whole college thing doesn't happen if she doesn't have that conference and take apart these presidents.
That's right.
That's reforming the whole elite college system before our eyes. We never thought this was going to happen.
And I think Trump is going to come out for her, big time. And I think Hochul is weak. Hochul only got this job because Cuomo needed someone female to stand next to him.
He thought he needed Buffalo. Didn't he think he needed Buffalo?
Well, and he was up against Zephyr Teachout that year, so he wanted a woman. But I mean, she's
even know her.
This accidental governor.
Right. So Seth Barron, I'm so glad you're in the building. It's so great for you to come down. If you're listening around the country, Seth, there's very few people that know more about New York politics than Seth and what it means to the nation. And he's here now. Seth Barron, thanks so much.
Oh, you're too kind. Thank you, Brian.